Good evening, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to tonight's episode of Talking Point. I'm your host, Saeed Niaz Ahmed. I can't say we have in our studios, but we have with us one of the guests today is Yasmin Brett, rather Councillor Yasmin Brett, and might I add, she has the honor of being the youngest mayor of Bengali regions in London, in the United Kingdom rather, and that was in 2001. I think it is the borough of Enfield. Yasmin went to University of Reading, studied politics, philosophy and international relations. She was trained in mental health and she started a Women's Empowerment Center, and that led to politics, and as they say, the cliche goes, the rest is history. Welcome to the program, Yasmin. How are you today? Can't hear you, there is some problem.
Well, I'm in a good mood in one way, but in a very sad mood in another way, because we've just heard about the death of yet another young girl, 2 hours ago. Terrible.
In London?
News.
Was it in London?
No, it was outside of London, but, the news is absolutely terrible, coming
True.
on the heels of the
Wherever
death
it is,
yes.
it is terrible. It's terrible news. And it shows that we are failing. There's a lot of talk, but we are failing. Tell us something about yourself, what made you decide to go into politics?
Well, I come from a very political family, Niaz Bhai, from Bangladesh. I had that in my background. Bless his soul, my father was involved in the independence movement of Bangladesh. His name was Arshaduzzaman. He served as Bangladesh's first ambassador to Algeria. He also was very much involved with all the journalists, briefing them throughout the Bangladesh war, the foreign correspondents, particularly to bring to the different audiences what was actually happening to Bangladeshi people. And this is our 50th anniversary year, so it is important that we recognize that so many people were involved in this, not just my father, but I do mention that.
Sure.
So I had a political background. And of course I came to study here, and the work I was doing around women attracted some attention, so I was slowly guided into politics, and of course, as you say, the rest is history. And I think that for me, politics has been very much of an opportunity to share any knowledge I've acquired, to help women, and other communities empower themselves. That's very much what I see my role as, somebody who is facilitating that empowerment so that people can gain their rights and justice in all systems.
Right. I remember having read somewhere, with probably your writing, I continue to remain interested in women's affairs and hope I have been able to bring change. Well, the topic of today's discussion is women in man's world. There can be many questions. Is it a man's world or is it a women and man's world? But you talk about that you have been able to, you hope that you have been able to bring change. What sort of changes did you think that are necessary? Like safety, safer streets, safer homes, equal opportunities, equal pay, longer maternity leaves. What did you have in your mind?
Well, the women's subject is a very, very broad subject. And, you know, we could take it from 1,000,001 different angles.
Right.
The particular group of people that I initially started working with were the garment workers in Islington and Hackney. And what we were doing there is, as you very rightly say, looking after their safety, particularly looking after issues of pay, looking after how we might help accommodate them. I was giving them advice on housing, welfare, and also we were finding some of them safe houses, particularly those who were unfortunately up against domestic violence and abuse. So that is how that section of the work started. And of course, we were able to set up the center, supported by the local authority. And then we set up a nursery alongside where 2 languages were being used, and the mothers were gaining education themselves as well as being able to bring their children to the nursery. So it was quite a big center. And then, you know, following that in local government, we have been arguing for, you know, I was serving as the cabinet member for communities, so we were supporting women's refuges, women's centers, and also, you know, honoring International Women's Day. I was involved in 2 particular events where we tried to, well, we didn't try, we did it. We brought science to the attention of young women, trying to get more women into science. And, you know, that was reasonably successful. More of our girls took A-levels in maths and so on. And then we had another one with women and arts, again, bringing attention to the fact that so few women artists are recognized in Britain, even in Britain today, you know, are so few of them are recognized. So always looking at issues of this nature.
Yeah, back in my days, they used to teach art as a subject at O and A levels, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, they still do. They still do. But the question is that although women study this, men study this, very few women artists are recognized and exhibited anywhere. And in fact, it was in Tower Hamlets, which is a big Bengali area. We had a group known as the Guerrilla Girls who did an exhibition there at the Whitechapel Gallery. And, you know, I worked with them to bring that same concept to Enfield so that people could see that, you know, women need to have an opportunity in art. And we had a big debate around that subject. And again, you know, we are trying to promote women artists. So,
right. Going back to Enfield, I mean, you mentioned East London, Tower Hamlets. What is the demographic composition of people in Enfield?
well, Enfield has got a high number of Turkish and Polish speakers, but it is also a place where we have a lot of Bengali speakers. A particular area of it called Ponder's End has got a large Bengali-speaking population. You know, of course, I've been able to work with them, although I don't represent that particular area. I have been able to work with them as the only Bengali-speaking woman counselor in the whole area,
right.
On a variety of issues. We have a large Asian community. The area that I particularly represent has got one of the largest Gujarati-speaking communities. So, you know, I've been working with them quite closely. And some of the subject areas have been around grave space. You know, there was a huge lack of grave space for people. So we were able to access that, and we now have a Muslim grave space. You know, various things that we have been doing. You know, it's a long period. I'm just picking out some highlights from there, but you know, it's a long period. Yes.
Well, last 13, 14 months have not been very good particularly for the grave space, because there have been so many deaths, you see, and in every borough I understand that there have been demands and people have been going farther and farther away to find place for their dear and near ones. See, that's unfortunate.
Absolutely, it's been absolutely terrible, and particularly for the BAME communities, it's been absolutely terrible, the statistics for, you know, our Black and Asian communities, many of them who are on the front line as doctors, nurses. They have suffered, unfortunately, disproportionately during this pandemic, and that has been recognized. You know, we were able to bring that subject up, and rotas were changed in hospitals, you know, to reflect this. The fact of the matter is that not only men, but also women, of course, have been even worse impacted by this, because very often they are the ones in the caring professions, again.
Well, what's another grave idea? Why is you know, finding a grave and the funerals, why are they so expensive?
Well, this is a very good question that you raise. This is actually something that needs, in my opinion, a proper debate, because it is a strategic level debate that needs to take place, in my opinion, at the level of the Greater London Authority.
True.
And I think that, you know, it's something that we could easily bring to Sadiq Khan, because the grave space, you know, there are people from other local authorities using Enfield's grave space, as are people from Enfield using other people's grave space. So you see, the fact is that within London, there is in fact very little allocated grave space. And I think that this is something that needs to be unlocked at that level. And, you know, then, of course, affordability is an issue that can be raised then as well. At the moment, of course, for example, in Enfield, they are looking at increasing the grave space and have done so. And they are looking at alternative funeral methods as well. You know, while in Islam, of course, we have people being buried in a plot, there are also environmental ways in which people can be buried.
True.
You know, that might be discussions that could be had, you know, in different communities.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. Back in the Middle East, where I worked for some time, they have a different way of burying people, you see, and they use the same space for several bodies. But it's about time that we take a break, and when we come back, we will try to find some more living subjects to lighten up the atmosphere. And in the second segment, we will be joined by Tania Ahmed. She is a social worker, activist, writer, and a political observer. She has been working with, we will come to that later. Okay then, we need to take a break right now. See you after 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Welcome back. In this segment, we have been joined by another guest, Tania Ahmed. Tania works in London. She was born in the Middle East, went to school there, came over to London, where her parents are, and she studied at Central St. Martin's, graduated, and works in one of the gateway boroughs as an immigration officer. Her work involves very close association with the Home Office. As I said before, she is also very keen about a woman's place in this man's world, and the safety of women at home and work is very close to her heart. Welcome to the show, Tania.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
How are you?
Hello.
How are things? Okay?
I'm good. I'm good.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
You're not working today. Today is Sunday. No.
It is Sunday.
Thankfully, thankfully. We have been talking about a lot of things with the other guests today, but I just wanted to tell you that the main topic of discussion today is man's world, they say, see, woman's place in the man's world, see, or is it a man's world? That's my question. Being a man, I ask that, see. Have you ever experienced any discrimination just because you are a woman? You have felt unsafe at work, you have felt unsafe while walking on the streets. I was reading something today, and one of the MPs, Zara Sultana, she said that she was walking on the pavement and she was crawled by somebody in the car, you see. So this is very disturbing. As Yasmin was telling, that somebody, a young girl has been murdered just outside London today. So what is happening and how to control this, and how do you see this as a young girl?
Well, first of all, thank you for calling me a young girl. So that's made my day. But and absolutely, as a female professional working, I think it's quite unusual if you actually hear that someone has not been discriminated against, and also that they haven't been harassed at some point, which is actually it's extremely sad. I've never spoken to any female who's not experienced some kind of negative attention. What is worse is that harassment isn't considered a crime in this day and age, when we know that it should be. We're all fully aware of the fact, I mean, we keep hearing it in the media constantly, that the police's attitudes towards crimes against women are not taken seriously, and half the time women don't pursue because they know that the outcome will be more than likely it won't go to court. So it's quite unfortunate. The other thing is I would like to highlight is that I don't feel that it's a woman's issue, nor is it a gender issue. I think it's a human being issue. And I think that living in a world where, yes, we're fully aware that, you know, equality is not really there, but the perpetrators are generally men. So if we don't involve men in this conversation and in this dialogue, then how do we progress? How do we come to a solution? So it's not a women's issue, and I think there's been a lot of language that's been used in the media, which is quite damaging, because I feel as though, as you know, a female says some almost looked as though we're sort of demonizing men. And we're not demonizing men at all. It's just highlighting the fact that this is an actual concern that needs to be brought to the forefront for changes to happen. You know, people have used words such as feminine Nazi, or, you know, men bashing. And also, actually, this morning, I'd actually heard someone referring to the Sarah Everard situation as alleged murder. How was that an alleged murder? It was a murder. We can say it was an alleged, you know, the perpetrator is alleged to be that person, but it's not an alleged murder. So I think the language being used is quite damaging also.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of changes that need to happen.
Yes, so we need a change. We need a change in our perceptions, in our education, in our attitude, in our laws, and if possible, in our behaviors. As Shakespeare had said a long time ago, the more near in blood, the more bloody. So most of these perpetrators, I understand, not only in this country but everywhere else, are the people who are very close to you, unsuspecting persons. Yasmin, are you there?
Yes, I'm there, and I very much like to back up what Tanya has said, because In a 2017 survey, they found that some 500,000 women had been the victims of some sort of sexual assault, and 85,000 had been either raped or victims of attempted rape. But it's also absolutely true that we must not be demonizing men. This is a joint effort that needs to be made, and I'd like to make reference to the Istanbul Convention, if I may. You may be aware that this convention is a very comprehensive convention that was signed by Britain and many other countries, 37 countries in Europe, that would certainly provide the very basic rights for women in preventing violence, prosecuting the perpetrators, protecting women, and setting up a monitoring framework for women. And it would also involve the regular awareness training, which is so very important for both women and men in relationship to the way they behave with each other, because these are all such important issues to combat violence against women, but also at another level, which is climate change. Right. Because they have found, that in order to be able to progress the sustainable development goals, that it is very important that women are empowered. And, a country like Bangladesh has actually prioritized women and has done the dialogue that Tanya talks about in the villages. They have engaged women mobilizers together with the village imams who have jointly worked on issues such as land distribution, who owns the land, and worldwide only some 13% of women are landowners, which is a very key issue in being able to discuss, decision making and having some kind of, power over your.
You're right. You're right. Even the law does not support land ownership by women. See, because men usually deceive them.
And they have done a good job there, frankly. And so, I'd like to pay tribute to that in our 50th anniversary year to all the good work they have done. And coming back to, Tanya's discussion, I think that, we need to have much more open debates with our menfolk so that, we can look at how, mothers are bringing up their children. A lot of the issues are actually issues of communication. True. Or the lack of communication.
You were chair of, Yasmin, you were chair of religious education for 10 years. Don't you think the moral values also play a very vital part in this?
Absolutely. You see, I was involved in Standing Advisory Council for Religious Education for 10 years, and the issues around women and faith are highly important because there are women who have strong attachment, and men, to a particular way of operating in their faith, which doesn't necessarily mean that they are weaker. It means they are different. They have a different way of approaching womanhood. And I think that this needs to be respected.
True.
And the discussion had some kind of contract, new social contract between women and men, based on, some of you have faith values, some of you have other values, but violence against women is a no-no in any circumstance. That has got to be the red line.
That's very good, you see, but we talk about so many things. You talked about Istanbul Conference. We have meetings here and there. The last meeting called by Mr. Boris Johnson on this issue was not attended by the Women's Affairs Minister. that says a lot about the attitude of those who are in power.
Well, I have to agree with you that, I am very disappointed. I know that the government has, after Sarah Everard, has stepped up, and I don't want in any way to politicize Sarah Everard's case because, God bless her soul and the family. I don't want to go into that, but, chronologically, they announced this large amount of money for lighting and safer streets and so forth. All very good, but, this discussion around women, as I say, they signed the treaty, the Istanbul Convention, but they never ratified it. True. Because the ratification of this treaty would impose certain basic measures like monitoring, how what women are experiencing. None of this has been done. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has organized a survey. A survey was done into women and what they're experiencing in terms of harassment and so forth, which is good. And she has reopened that in the light of everything that's happening now. But the reality is that during this pandemic, the international labor organizations have been saying that women have been pushed back to the levels of power they had in 2017. Because in the house, they've not only lost employment, they're having to take on more caring duties and so forth, which are important duties, don't get me wrong. But the point is that they are having to renegotiate their position in the house. And we need to be aware of these because...
Yasmin Brett, we need to take a break here. And
I thank you very much.
Thank you very much for giving us time.
Because as you know, I'm going to have to take your leave. But thank you for hosting this very interesting debate. I hope we can be together again at some other point. Bye-bye to you and your lovely NTV. And Tanya, bye-bye. Lovely meeting you.
It was a pleasure hosting you. Thank you very much. Just before the break, we were talking about women's affairs and women's role in a man's world. And we had two guests at that moment, Yasmin Brett and Tanya Ahmed. Yasmin Brett had to leave on an errand, so we are left with Tanya Ahmed for the third segment. Tanya, you were born in the Middle East, and it's a very unusual day today that we have two ladies, and they have Middle Eastern connections. One with Turkey, Yasmin Brett, and you with Saudi. When you came back to London for your higher studies, what was your impression? What did you, I'm sure that it struck you very different, the role of women in Saudi, in Middle Eastern countries, and in this country where you saw women all around you, and they were not in an abaya, not in a burqa.
Was different. It's a culture shock because studying in the Middle East, in Saudi, I had actually studied at an international school. So the difference that I felt was that whereas over there I was sort of living in this protective bubble, and over here it was just freedom, all this freedom all of a sudden. And although freedom is a fantastic thing, I think also what then came to my attention was the fact that that safety net wasn't quite there as it had been. I mean, whereas, of course, you know, in the UK you can just go off to the theatre, or go to the cinema, or go with your friends to the park. Whereas in Saudi, yes, there were certain things you could do, but you know there would be people who would probably be driving you to this place, or you would specifically be doing these activities within the sort of environment, school environment, or within
safe environment, safe compound.
exactly. But at the same time, you know, that's the thing about, I mean, is it safety or is it
Liberty.
or could it be something?
Or freedom.
I mean, so it's one of those things. I mean, freedom comes at a price, I suppose, and so over here, yes, there was a lot of freedom, but then there was always that feeling of obviously my parents, you know, would worry. They'd want me home by a certain time and needed to know where I was, and it wasn't even just their concerns, it was my own concerns as well. And like women have spoken before, you know, sort of letting people know exactly where you are, if you're traveling by yourself, and if it's evening, holding your keys in your hand, kind of being aware of your surroundings, and as the years have progressed, obviously trying not to listen to music too loud, these types of things. I mean, yes, these are the differences, and obviously in the Middle East, whilst
you're back in Saudi, Tanya, back in Saudi, you did have friends, Saudi girls from well-heeled families, and they did enjoy life to a certain extent. They did their mischief. They would ride bikes and they would drive a car. They would even ride horses. And things have changed a lot. Now women can drive in Saudi. I'm sure you're aware.
Only happened in 2018, though.
Yes.
It only happened in 2018, and also this actually went through after quite a few activists were imprisoned, reprimanded. So there were sacrifices for this, to be able to just drive. I mean, you know, growing up, I would see there were many women who were working, you know, in the medical profession, teaching profession. That was quite normal within sort of, you know, middle classes, educated families. But I would never see writers, journalists, you know, people working for the government or the ministry. However, obviously that has changed. Obviously there's a new monarch there, and who has highlighted that, you know, certain aspects of life, it's not a religious sort of factor that, you know, it was more of a cultural and social issue that was really stopping women from having
Right. Did I tell you that one of the newspapers that I used to write for, at that moment we could not imagine, but the chief editor of that newspaper is a lady.
I had heard that. And I think that's an amazing thing. One of my childhood friends actually now, she is a member of the Royal Advisory Council, and that is something which is not only a prestigious role, but it's something that would have never have happened back in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. But I mentioned I had grown up with a few Saudi friends. Most of my friends were, you know, children of expatriates. But there was some, you know, sort of forward-thinking, and the seeds were planted. So, yes, and they would get up to mischiefs. And when you said they would be riding around in bikes, it wasn't just bikes. These were like Kawasaki motorbikes back then. And obviously, you know, with the help of their brothers and cousins, male cousins, were they getting up to this kind of mischief, you know, skipping school and doing these type of things. But those are the girls who are now obviously in these type of professional role. Yes, times have progressed, but it's been a slow progression.
It has been very slow, but very steady. I can tell you that in education, Saudi girls are getting education, they're becoming doctors and engineers, and opportunities are being provided by the government. See, it is not that there is lack of opportunity, there is a desire, but no, that there are more places for girls at medical schools than for boys, see, and that is something very good, see. Did you, when you were in Saudi, did you experience any problem at all when you went to school, or like people suffer here? See, as we say, every woman suffers here. See, did expatriates girls suffer there? No.
I think most women, I mean, it's a global issue. This whole, as I said, I feel quite strongly that I don't like to call it a women's issue. Mm-hmm. I like to call it a human being issue. And I see parallels with the Black Lives Matter, where there were some people who continuously insisted on calling it All Lives Matter. But we have to recognize the fact that there was an issue there that had to be acknowledged, that Black Lives Matter. And therefore, that's how I would say that, you know, it's a human being issue. And as you said, did I find there was issues? There's always going to be issues. And I mean, I couldn't say a specific time, but yes, I did hear things. And although it may not have happened to myself, but yes, there was issues, but not on the scale that I found in the UK, and which is actually a tragedy. You know, as I had mentioned before. Do you have any particular observation?
Right. Do you have any particular observation as an immigration officer? Do you find people have been discriminated against on the basis of sex?
Well, discrimination per se.
Not in this country, but back in their own country.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's generally how I end up sort of having to, you know, these cases end up with myself. There are cases of forced marriages, FGM. There's people fleeing domestic violence overseas and here. So yes, absolutely, and as I said, you know, the perpetrator, unfortunately, is male, and therefore there has to be some sort of accountability. But you know, it isn't just men who are doing these things.
Okay, Tanya, thank you very much. It was a pleasure hosting you, and it was very interesting to talk to you. We hope that we will get some more time, another day, another topic. And we'll invite our guest again, today's guest, because I feel that there is a lot more to talk about this.
Absolutely. A lot more.
Thank you very much for being with us. And thank you, viewers, for being with us. Same time, same channel, next week with another distinguished guest or guest. Bye for now. Take care.